Welcome to Hansen Hour. We have a very special guest today. I am Caroline Hansen.
And I'm Kiese Hansen.
I'm Lenny, not
Lenny!
Hansen.
Lenny, lean into the Hansen. The Hansen.
Today I'm Lenny Hansen.
Yes. Lenny, can you give us a brief intro as to who you are?
Yes. My name's Lenny. You can call me Leonard if you really want to, though my dad might answer to that. I am a proud member of Section 4 and a proud slayer of Group Me the Giant. I don't think anything more needs to be said. That's it. By way of biographical information, for those who don't know, I was born in New York, still have a ton of family there. My younger sibling lives and works in Brooklyn, and I grew up in Florida, Southwest Florida, super homogenous area of the country, overwhelmingly white, made growing up mixed race complicated. Went to college in North Carolina, much more diverse at the university, much better experience. Worked in Virginia as a software engineer, wanted to go to law school, went to law school, paying a lot of money. And currently drinking Costco brand cognac for my drink of choice this hour.
Yeah, I'm drinking a spiked seltzer. Kiki, what do you have?
I have a Be More Hazy IPA.
Ooh, trendy.
And I don't like IPAs, but I'm drinking it.
Hoppy of people, huh?
So hoppy. Oh, Lenny, this reminds me, every time you say this, I'm like, I need to talk to Lenny about growing up in a super homogenous environment. So again, flagging that, and we will have this discussion finally this semester. I will put it on your calendar.
Yeah.
So, I think you're the first interview of technically the new semester. Natalie was the first student interview of the new semester. Natalie was the first interview of the new year. So we have to ask you, how do you think second semester will be different from first semester?
There's how I think it will be and how I hope it will be. I hope that it's easier. I hope that it's chiller. I hope that it's healthier. And I hope that it's at least as fun as we managed to make the fall semester. I think what are the differences between the first and second semester that then, change our experiences, that we've been around the block once. The pressure on us is just lower because things like jobs will be done hopefully earlier rather than later. And we've all seen each other for a whole semester already. And so when we flub in class or when we want to crack jokes or something, we, are starting with a whole community of a whole cast of characters. I think that just makes things a lot easier. I think the big thing is that we've been around the block once. Like, if you were terrified of cold calls in first semester, you're like, oh, they're not so bad. When you mess up, literally nobody remembers. And all of those things we thought upper level students were lying to us about, we now know to be true. And so I think that's good. I also think that things like final exams are going to be more in perspective of like, they're doable. You can start them and finish them and then go on to read a book on break. And you can just, I hope we can take ourselves a little less seriously. Something that comes with having been around the block once is having more perspective, having seen both sides of a semester. And I don't know if this is ironic, but by virtue of having more perspective and more view, you're able to focus a little bit better and think about what you want to do as opposed to what you're being thrown about into doing. There's less turbulence, and that gives you more agency. And I think that's exciting about the second time around with anything.
Yeah, that definitely, so wise. That's definitely something that I think about a lot, where I'm like, the what ifs have kind of been nulled out because there's only so much that can happen, right? I don't do a reading, I get cold called, nothing happens. Not saying I've ever done that, for the record. But yeah, no, it's a really good point. All of them are really good points. I think something that you said that really resonated with me was like the just like having knowledge by doing, especially in an environment that no one's really gone through before. I feel like I always kind of took a grain of salt with the older people's advice on 1L year just by the fact of like, oh, but they were in person. And so now we're remote, but we've already had that experience once, and we have this kind of information that no one has no one really has about the 1L semester, the 1L fall semester being remote. And I think that that's like a really unique experience because there's so much like 1L guidance floating around, but not really as related to pandemic 1L guidance.
Yeah, no, that's right. I would get advice from 2Ls and 3Ls, and I'd be like, you don't know me. You don't know what I'm about to go through. But to some extent they did, and to the extent that they didn't, we figured it out ourselves, hopefully.
Totally. So that kind of broadens into our second question, which is general reflections on like how this year has been for you, and things that surprised you, things that you were things that you were impressed by, things that you were less impressed by, and kind of what you're hoping to get out of the rest of your law school experience, which is a really small and specific question that you'll be able to really easily.
Is this like the year broadly, or do you mean like my year at HLS so far?
I don't know. I think probably, I mean, wherever you want to take it.
Yeah.
I'll center it on HLS because I think that's where we have the most common ground, if anything, to understand shared experiences. I think the year so far has been, and this is an overused analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway. It's been a real roller coaster. I think, I just retraced the months, like beginning of September was like real low point. I was like grinding every day thinking, I need to know this material well enough to like teach it the next day through whatever cold call gets thrown at me. And that's how I learned a lot in like college and high school was like, if I can learn this well enough to teach it to my peer who needs some help, I feel satisfied. But in law school, that's simply not possible. Apparently, the law is something you have to like accumulate through like, I don't know, so much exposure, and it's just not really bite sized. Even though it's fed to you bite sized, the reality of it isn't something you can really regurgitate well or properly until later on. And so I put a lot of pressure on myself, not realizing that in early September. And I was talking to a friend in section 7 about how we would get to the end of every day for like those 2 toughest weeks at the beginning and just feel like we'd given everything. We had nothing left to give when we went to sleep. And in her case, she likened it to, or maybe it was me, likened it to feeling like just a gray blob at the end of the day at night. Just you start the day vibrant. I'm Lenny. I have these like feelings and these thoughts and these ideas. And by the end of the day, it's like all of that individuality has been sapped away from all the work and giving you've been doing for law school work. And then I realized at the end of 2 weeks, I was like, this isn't sustainable. It's not healthy. It's not useful. My cold call answers aren't significantly better for it, and they don't matter. Yeah.
For the record, they were great.
Glad you think so. And so I pulled out of that, and the roller coaster began to climb a little bit. But like Icarus, you don't want to fly too low, and you don't want to fly too high. And so I don't think I ever flew too high, like took it too chill. Although I did. My eternal apologies to John Goldberg should he ever watch this. I totally stopped doing torts reading in November. I did my best to recap and catch up in other ways, but I realized that the reading load of the semester, plus my ability to live a life outside of law school, like could not sustain 4 classes plus LRW. And I was like, which of these professors, and this is my compliment to John Goldberg, which of these professors has such robust PowerPoints and well thought out presentations that I can truly just plug into that fire hose and never look back? And that was torts. So things like that in October really helped me out. And then going into October and November to continue the timeline, I think that part of the year was really lower, but not for academic reasons, because I really do feel like I got a handle on that in October. But the like emotional and psychological drain of living on my own in Cambridge in a studio, which I'd never lived alone before, and having the election going on, and also the looming pressure and this weird culture of silence about studying and grades, really started to set in. And I expressed some of that to Cohen in our section meeting. I was like, I show up to class and I like do my best with cold calls, and then I spend like the rest of the day like using whatever mental resources I have left to like not be super sad all the time. So you see my best foot forward in class, but all this time outside of class looks very different. And in my undergrad, there were all sorts of op-eds over the years written about effortless perfection. Is that a term that's like widespread? Yeah. And it just feels much better to tell people like, somebody might look good in class, but they like might not look so good outside of class. And I think it's really important, especially online. And this was a lesson I learned through the semester, to be real with one another. And maybe that's just like my personality quirk, is like valuing authenticity really highly. Not everybody shares that. Some people are much more stoic. Jody Freeman absolutely kept cold calling us on election day, and that's a style, that's a preference, we work to get through hard times, um, and different strokes for different folks. But I learned through the semester, how to get academics in perspective and to understand what's necessary and what's not. And then emotionally and psychologically, I learned how to watch TV again and to like read manga in my case, and just be like, this is pure escapism. This is because it's fun to be in a story for hours at a time. And so the year had both those academic, but more broadly like lifestyle and mental health and self-care journeys embedded in it. I think, where I'm at today, especially with job search and grades having come out and things like that, is focusing on the question of where do I understand happiness to be found? Because I think a lot of the prevailing tides at law school Dean Manning has never come up to me and said like, this is what happiness is to you now that you're here. But by one structure or another, or by an assembly of different nudges, a lot of people come to believe that happiness is like that big law position, or this ACLU affiliate, or this clerkship, or that public defender office. But I think that's part of the challenge of law school, is staying true to yourself, but also growing without betraying yourself. And a key part of that is understanding when your conception of happiness is enough and when you should push those boundaries a little bit. Maybe I'm not comfortable hypothetically at this point doing direct services work and all of the emotional labor and almost social work quality that work entails. But maybe that's where I want to be, and maybe there's a distance that I have to close to get there. And that might be healthy happiness growth. Maybe I'm less certain of what I want to do, and people keep telling me clerkships are prestigious. I don't know why they're valuable, but they're prestigious and everybody does them. But I think, what works for one person, what might not be right for everybody else. And at this point in my career, it's balancing happiness with ambition, and balancing happiness with a genuine desire to help people, and to recognize that gifts are for sharing. And also that self-care is important. And so the roller coaster has ultimately told me, and the story of Icarus has ultimately told me, balance is everything. And constantly checking in with yourself is everything.
Totally.
I feel like so many people will find deep relief in everything you just said. I mean, I don't even know where to like go off of, because there's so many things that like deeply resonate. Like the happiness part is so true. I remember so many times the first couple of weeks of school where I would like log off a Zoom and immediately just start crying. Or like in even these moments, even over J term, where in part thinking about like what I wanted to do with my summer and all that kind of things, like kind of forgetting why you came to school and feeling very drained and empty in terms of like, who am I? What am I doing here again? And that's like, and especially in this environment is like it's like even more isolating, right? Because we're not doing it next to each other. And what else? Oh, I don't know. I could go on forever about this stuff, but I don't know, Caroline, if you have any immediate.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I think one thing that jumped out to me that you said was meritocracy to serve a particular end versus just the kind of meritocracy treadmill that we all find ourselves on, where, we're accustomed to try to do the best, but then, why at this point, like we're in law school, we're fully adults. So it's like you're achieving to the end of finding your own happiness and making yourself happy versus achieving to get to another place that could then get you to another place that could then get you to another place where eventually you'd be happy.
Yeah.
I think that that's a really important distinction, and the fact that you have like a very clear-eyed view about it is, I think, will serve you really well.
Yeah, and I would add, I saw a tweet a couple days ago that was something like, I'll paraphrase it heavily, but it was like, I am miserable doing what I'm doing today, but then I reminded myself, 6 months ago, I was miserable doing what I was doing then, and I told myself if I could just get to this place, I could be happy. And that cycle just goes on and on. The escalator isn't real, and the treadmill is all there is unless you step off it. And for whatever clear-eyed view I have about this idea that sources of normativity, and I'm stealing the title of an article I read a few years ago. The fact that sources of normativity should be internal and come from us in tension with others and how we live as communities, it takes some courage to go to a place like that's so prestige driven, and then to say, I'm going to choose the unsexy thing, be that, whatever sort of work you view that way, and to not choose the traditional prestigious thing, the gold star or what have you. Um, I don't know how many people you hear going to Harvard Law School realizing that, the law is kind of messed up, buying into, critical legal studies and race crits, and understanding that law is just an arena for the powerful. And that's a really resonant idea with me these days. And then saying, you know what, I am going to go into a social worker program and, serve people that way. Or I'm going to full-time like work at a food bank and like directly serve people in that respect. And it takes a lot of courage to make that jump. I'm not sure that I'm there yet. I'm sure that I have some clarity about what's just a gold star or just a status symbol and what's more helpful. But I don't know yet if I have the courage to do what's most helpful. And I think that's a journey that will take a couple more years.
I feel very lucky that one of my J-term facilitators said exactly that, was like, I took the weird, like, different route. And so if any of you want to come just talk about what that could potentially look like. And it was just like, even if, let's say, like, for the people in the class who didn't want it, who aren't even thinking about that, I think just hearing it was really affirming and just kind of provided a perspective that we don't get a lot, especially our first year.
Yeah. And so much of this stuff too is like, it's kind of serendipitous. Like, for example, like I was inspired to try and do what I want to do for the summer through a friend who I met through the Equal Democracy Project, because she had done that. So I think that kind of is really valuable from that person in your J term, who is basically saying, I authorize you, like I tacitly authorize you doing this thing because I did it too. It's just like, it's a really valuable thing to hear from a mentor.
Yeah, all good thoughts. Something that was a disorientation, one of the call-in responses was, I will not let Harvard change me.
Yeah.
And talking about that tension between what's mainstream, what's you, what's, the maverick thing to do. I think it's okay to let Harvard grow you and to nurture your better impulses, as long as it doesn't change you into something you no longer recognize, whether that's, it can change sort of the form, but the substance of, helping people or, having a particular community in mind. You want Harvard to grow you in that respect and not to change you in others.
That reminds me of something else that, okay, yeah, another point which we can table for later, but just this, like, I really struggle too with kind of having to remind myself also that a lot of the cases we read are real, right? Like, we so rarely spend time with the backstory. And even like in the 2 days since the new semester, I've had a couple moments where it's like, oh wait, this thing that we're treating almost like a game is real in someone's real life. And so what, like, how can we also just check in with each other and kind of bring us back to some kind of grounding that's like, the stuff that we're learning is real and has like real implications on community. So that's just something that I'm thinking about, and a lot of what you shared reminds me of that too.
I'm glad.
Well, so our last question for you is more more fun. Well, all of that was fun. Just more serious. But we wanted to throw in one of our randoms. So what is your, and you can answer it in 2 ways. What is your favorite article of clothing? You can give a quarantine answer and then a normal times answer.
Okay, well, I was primed for this question, so I have them here.
Show and
I
tell.
don't actually know if there's a quarantine, non-quarantine distinction. I wear these things rather liberally, including to my old workplace when I worked at Capital One in a big shiny headquarters building in Northern Virginia. So you can decide for yourself which is which. My first piece of clothing is a blanket, so I'm cheating, but I used to wear this
This blanket.
blanket.
Yes, we love the blanket.
Love the blanket.
And I had a bright red one when I was in my office.
It looks so comfy.
It is. It's supremely comfortable. And, there's a wrapping style that
Did you get it at Costco? Because I feel like I've also seen that blanket at Costco.
Gosh, did I?
Costco
I
King.
want to say I got this at Yield Target before I moved into college. But the key to the blanket wrap, really, that I do in class that you'll see where it looks like it's a robe around my neck, is you do like a shorter end on your left and you tuck it over your shoulder and hold it in place.
Wait, I'm gonna grab a blanket. I'm gonna grab a blanket.
Okay, this is an experiential learning experience. Forget J-term.
Better than J-term. Okay. All right. So the shorter end. Okay.
Yeah, so instead of holding the blanket out 50-50, you're gonna instead of the 50th percentile of the blanket being behind your neck, maybe it's more like the 40th or 30th.
Okay.
Just enough where you can take the shorter end, wrap it around your shoulder, no more. And what you do is you put it between your shoulder and the blanket. So now the blanket holds it in place.
Yes.
Over your shoulder, Caroline.
Oh, over. I was like, what?
not armpit. Yeah, behind your
armpit.
neck.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Ooh.
And then, you got to take the long end, and because it's longer, it has a little more weight to it. You throw it over yourself.
It's like a 1940s shawl throw.
And then you got to hold it in place with your chin and get your arm out of there. You can adjust it too. But yeah. And that's how I get this really nice wrap. It keeps the neck warm, and the blanket tends to stay in place because it's pinning itself. You want your hands out though. If y'all want to take this look to class, you gotta make sure to have your hands out.
I just get cold told. I'm like, yeah, Marbury versus Madison.
Bro, you gotta wear this style with confidence. When I was wearing this blanket in class one day, I didn't wait for Jody Freeman to cold call me. I volunteered to speak, and I showed up with a blanket. That's just the confidence that Harvard brought us for, I guess, or whatever. So this is something I wore a lot in quarantine, as you saw on Zoom, but also I'd wear this around the office, and people, I literally had a guy ask me from another team, he was like, Lenny, is that because it was bright red. I mean, this is like a bright red blanket I had in the office. He was like, is that a fashion statement? I was like, no, I'm just cold. But I like to think that he thought it was a fashion statement.
I'm gonna try to take a screenshot because it's so funny. I find this hysterical.
Oh wait, yeah, all of us. I can't do it. Lenny, I think I might need some practice alone.
That's all right. Practice
Okay, you
makes
ready?
perfect. Did you get it?
My parents are always like, what's online law school like? I'm like, oh, standard.
Well, I guess this is more, I haven't worn this in quarantine, but mostly because I don't want to get it dirty. So I wear it pretty infrequently, but I have this matching pajama set. It's like Mickey Mouse, and it's the fluffiest material. I can't share it with you, but believe me, I would if I could. And then it's these comfy pajama bottoms. And for gosh, I don't know if it was for Christmas or what a couple years ago, but I got one of these in my size and one of these in my girlfriend's size, and now we just have these comfy pajama sets. And matching PJs are cliche, but they're comfy, and I don't care. I'm clearly all about comfort, um,
This
even
is
when it's not a pandemic, but especially when it's a pandemic.
king of comfort. I just got this. I actually didn't get it. My boyfriend did, but this fuzzy fleece,
Yeah,
Wow.
that thick. That's my comfort.
I love it. The jacket I'm wearing right now is like, it's not fleece, but it's kind of like cotton woven like it, and it's just the warmest thing. Uniqlo makes the greatest warm weather or cold weather stuff.
I've heard that.
So yeah, those are my picks. The blanket's a look, but it's also, a comfort. Yeah.
Well, I think that we should put a pin in this one, as Jody says, and not take up more of your time. But this has been so lovely, as always. I always feel like a breath of fresh air whenever I talk to you, Lenny. Uh,
Oh,
and, we are so excited that you decided to join us and hope you have a great rest of the day.
thank you. That's very kind. Thank you for having me. And here's to many more interviews that I can watch from y'all.